So Anthony Yarde defeats Tony Avalant in 7 rounds. Avalant did not come out for the 8th. His corner pulled him out, I believe. This was a good workout for Anthony Yarde, I would say. It wasn't a competitive fight. Anthony Yarde won every single round. But it was a good workout because he was in there against a resilient opponent, a guy who wasn't just going to lay down the first time he got hit with a good shot. He was in with a guy who was taller than he was, who was moving a lot, and occasionally would throw back his own punches. So Yarde had to cut off the ring, wear the opponent down, which he did well with body punches. Cutting off the ring, he didn't do an amazing job. He did an okay job, but body punching, he did very, very well. Good combination punching, switching the attack from head to body, just chipping away and wearing down his opponent's resilience over the 7 rounds. The opponent was very game. He was very tough. He got dropped twice. He got up, and as I say, eventually it was a corner retirement. So yeah, overall a decent performance by Anthony Yarde. He got caught a couple times, but it's boxing. You're gonna get caught a couple times. It was nothing crazy, nothing terrible. You look at Avalant and his previous opponent, whose name I find difficult to pronounce, and you think to yourself, why wasn't he fighting these kind of guys in his 9th and 10th fight, or his 10th and 11th fight? Maybe these kind of guys weren't available, I don't know, but you feel like he could have done this kind of job and he could have benefited from this kind of work back then, and he would have progressed more quickly, if you understand what I'm saying. In his 9th and 10th fight, I can't remember off the top of my head who he was fighting, but it was guys who you'd never heard of that he was bowling over in a couple of rounds. Whereas these guys that he's fought in his last 2 fights, they're kind of former fringe contenders slash, borderline journeymen who are going to give you a few rounds. And I just wonder, should he have been fighting these guys in his 10th, 11th fight, for example, rather than in his 15th, 14th and 15th fight? I guess it's nitpicking at the end of the day. And Tunde Ajayi and Frank Warren are being very careful when it comes to selecting Anthony Yarde's opponents. They are willing to step up against somebody like a Frank Buglioni. I think because of Buglioni's style, they see Buglioni as a very basic guy, a guy who doesn't bring much in the way of boxing skill, a guy who just trades on his strength and punching power and aggression, and they probably feel like Yarde has got enough to deal with somebody like that. But when they're dealing with someone who's a bit more technical and tall and what have you, like Jose Burton, for example, they might be a little more hesitant. Well, they do seem to be more hesitant about taking that particular fight. But still, Yarde is at least progressing now because of the fact that he's going more rounds. So even though he hasn't been in a competitive fight yet, he's at least not treading water anymore, because his first, as I say, 10, 11, 12 fights, I felt like he was treading water. He really wasn't learning anything, bowling these guys out in a couple of rounds, guys who, never mind not just, not only being not competitive with him, they weren't even really very resilient. So he's in there now with guys who are still not very competitive, but they're at least resilient. So you can try a few things out. As I say, Avalant was moving a lot, so he could work on his strategy for trying to break down a moving target. So yeah, I felt overall it was a decent performance. I know some people are criticizing it, that's cool, but when you think of the fact that the guy won every single round and he got hit, what, 4 or 5 times with clean headshots, and they weren't even that clean actually, to be honest. And when I say clean headshots, I'm talking about power punches. He got hit with more jabs than that, but nothing crazy. And as one of the commentators said, Yarde, you would imagine, is going to be more defensively minded when he fights a better opponent, because he was fighting a guy here with no power. He was taking chances and risks that he maybe wouldn't take against a guy whose power he respected. So we'll see. I also understand that people are a little concerned that Yarde isn't getting enough character building fights at the moment. Fights where he's forced to really push himself to get the win. And that maybe because they're building him up as this beast, that's what they call him, the beast, and he's this happy-go-lucky type of character, that when things actually get tough and the smile gets wiped off his face, then he's gonna crumble. This is what some people's fear is with Anthony Yarde, and that remains to be seen. And, you know, I can see why some people believe that may happen because of the fact that his training setup appears to be full of a lot of cheerleaders and gas men and people just telling him he's amazing and he's a beast and this, that, and the other. Will he still be a beast if he gets hit on the chin and hits the canvas? Will he be a beast in that situation? Because Anthony Joshua is a beast because why? He got hit by Vladimir Klitschko, dropped with a tremendous right hand by Klitschko, got off the floor, rallied back and knocked Klitschko out in the 11th. That's a beast. That's a beast in terms of the mental strength of even when you're knocked down and feeling dejected, you manage to rally back and snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. Does Anthony Yarde have that kind of mentality? Because that's the mentality that ultimately you're going to need at the top level, especially when you're somebody like an Anthony Yarde who looks very slick and composed, and he's clearly very naturally talented with punching power, hand speed and coordination, combination punching ability and all that. Nice punch selection, nice punch variety. Very talented, but because he hasn't had an extensive amateur career, he hasn't had that process of becoming battle hardened yet. He hasn't had that process. You look at Joshua Buatsi, for example, who in my view is not as naturally physically gifted as Yarde, but Buatsi is a guy who has an extensive amateur background, and when you look at him, you know he has that battle hardenedness, if that's even a word, right? He looks battle hardened just in his demeanor, in his eyes, in his calmness when opponents are punching back at him. He never looks flustered or anything like that. The man's battle hardened, okay, mentally. Does Anthony Yarde have that? Has he had good enough sparring to have it? And again, maybe they need to bring in some opponents now who are not really designed to beat him yet, because he is a work in progress. Okay, if you're managing him, you're not trying to throw him in there with Kovalev anytime soon, because he only had whatever it was, 11 amateur fights, and it was at a fairly low level, and 15 professional fights now. So you want to try and see what he has in his gas tank, see what he has in terms of character, but you want to be careful about doing it. So at the moment, they're putting him in with guys who can survive. They're going to need to bring in guys who can survive and have a bit more ambition. I'm not a professional matchmaker, so I'm not going to give you any suggestions off the top of my head. Maybe some of you guys can, about who you think would be a good fight for Anthony Yarde right now. The Buglioni fight is a good fight, I think. But Buglioni and his team don't really seem to be that keen on making it anytime soon. I know Buglioni recently in some IFL interview was saying, oh, he'll smash Anthony Yarde to pieces and this, that, and the other. Okay, cool. Let's see the paperwork. Let's get the fight done. Hopefully it can happen. That I would like to see. As far as Jose Burton, I can see why his team don't want the Jose Burton fight. It's frustrating for people like me and, you know, many other fans, because we'd like to see Jose Burton versus Yarde because that's a real fight. But in terms of developing the guy, I can understand why Frank Warren and Tunde Ajayi are not looking for a Burton fight. They might come out with excuses about why they don't want it, but I think we can all read between the lines and we know why they don't want it. And it's not because of the fact that he lost to Frank Buglioni. It's because stylistically, they don't like the matchup as much as they like Frank Buglioni. Buglioni is a much more basic fighter than Jose Burton. And I think that's why they're targeting Buglioni rather than Burton. So anyway, let me know what you think in the comment section below about Anthony Yarde's performance against Avalant. Do you think it, like me, that it was a step up that was maybe slightly overdue? Or do you think they've stepped him up at the exact right time? And when I say step up, again, they're not competitive fights, but they're guys who are at least now giving him a few rounds. Do you, like me, think they should have given him these type of opponents in his 9th and 10th or 10th and 11th fight? Or do you think that having him in his 14th and 15th fight is perfectly fine? Let me know how you feel in the comment section, people. It's happening. I'm out.